What if the label you gave your child, the one that helped you make sense of their quirks, their behavior, their mood, was actually the thing that keeps them from becoming who they really are? What if most of what we call personality isn't discovered at all, but assigned? Right now, somewhere, a child is being told they're shy. Another is being praised for always being the leader. A third is dismissed as dramatic. A fourth celebrated as gifted. These labels stick. They shape expectations. They shape relationships. They even shape identity. But here's the twist. What if these labels, even the well-meaning ones, are not just incomplete, but limiting? This is where Carl Jung's voice cuts through the noise like a blade. Long before personality tests became digital party tricks and workplace filters, Jung proposed something far more radical. He believed that each of us enters the world not as a blank slate, but as a mystery, carrying deep innate preferences for how we engage with reality, not skills, not interests, but functions of the psyche. Jung described 4 such functions: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. Each one a different way of perceiving the world and deciding what matters within it. And here's where it gets fascinating. Modern studies now support the idea that personality isn't just formed by experience, it emerges early. Infants show preferences in attention, comfort, and engagement before they even speak. The foundations of temperament are visible before culture has had a chance to shape them. That means your child's personality isn't just a product of your parenting style or the school system or the media. It's something much older, something innate, something sacred. One child thinks through problems logically, trying to understand how the world fits together. Another feels their way forward, tuned to emotion and harmony. One is captivated by the present moment, touching, tasting, observing. Another lives in possibility, spinning dreams out of silence, asking what if with every breath. These aren't phases. These are early signals, not of what a child should be, but who they already are. But, and this is crucial, Jung also warned against typing children too soon, because while one function may dominate early on, the others are still growing. A child is like a tree. One branch might reach out first, catching the sunlight, but the full shape of the tree is yet to unfold. The real risk isn't that we misunderstand them, it's that we freeze them, that we see a dominant function and declare, this is who you are, and in doing so stop looking, stop asking, stop allowing the slow revelation of self, because once you define a child, they begin to live within that definition. So the question isn't just what type is my child? The better question is, am I still watching, or have I already decided? There's a moment in every parent's life when they look at their child, not the infant they held, not the toddler they guided, but the growing, changing person in front of them, and realize, I don't fully know who you are anymore. It's a moment of awe and a moment of danger, because in that gap between who the child is and who we think they are, there's a powerful temptation to fill the silence with a label. He's the quiet one. She's the high achiever. He's always been difficult. She's got leadership qualities. These labels are comforting. They give shape to the chaos of parenting. But they also all become scripts. Scripts the child begins to perform before they've even had a chance to question them. This is where personality typing, especially tools like the Myers-Briggs, can quietly become dangerous. Originally designed to help adults understand themselves better, the MBTI took inspiration from Jung's theories, but transformed them into something much more rigid. 16 boxes, letter codes, neat summaries, and once introduced into parenting culture, it became something seductive, a shortcut to understanding your child. Except children don't need shortcuts, they need space. Typing a child too early, before their inner landscape has even had time to take shape, is like planting a sapling and deciding it must grow into a bonsai. You water it differently, you trim it differently, you bend it to match the image in your head, and slowly, silently, it becomes something smaller than it was meant to be. Even Jung, who pioneered the very functions these tests draw from, warned against applying them rigidly. He believed that personality unfolds over time, through stages of conflict, growth, and reflection. That forcing an identity too early was not just unwise, but harmful. And yet the modern world runs on identity shortcuts. We don't just observe anymore. We define, we don't just guide, we assign, and children notice. A boy who hears you're a thinker may begin to devalue his own emotions. A girl praised as empathetic may begin to suppress anger or boundaries. A child labeled introverted may start avoiding social situations not out of preference, but out of performance. We don't just type them, we train them to type themselves. This is where the damage begins, not with malice, but with misinterpretation. A child's moment of struggle becomes a fixed trait. Their temporary retreat becomes a permanent label. Their messy exploration is mistaken for clarity. But personality is not a static object, it's a river, and children are still upstream. So what do? We begin again. We replace certainty with curiosity. We let go of tidy boxes and choose open questions. We watch not for confirmation but for surprise, and we resist the urge to fix in place what is still in motion, because the child you think you know, the one whose type you believe you've already discovered, might just be waiting for permission to grow beyond it. And they're watching to see if you'll let them. Every parent has felt the tug, that deep need to understand who their child is, to crack the code, to finally know what makes them tick. That need for clarity can be overwhelming, especially in a world that demands speed, optimization, and results. Typing your child feels like progress, like control, like love made efficient. But what if that clarity comes at a cost? What if the very act of typing a child is the beginning of their confinement? The Myers-Briggs type indicator was never meant for children. Its creators, Catherine Briggs and Isabel Myers, built it to help adults understand themselves, not to define developing minds. Yet, over time, MBTI became a cultural shorthand, an entire identity structure delivered in 4 letters: INFJ, ESTP, ENFP, ISTJ. And once those codes entered parenting circles, the damage began quietly, because personality in children isn't fixed, it's still folding in on itself, blooming slowly. And the moment we name it too early, we begin to interfere with its unfolding. Typing a child doesn't just describe who they are, it creates a subtle gravity. It pulls behaviors into patterns, preferences into roles, and soon identity becomes less about truth and more about repetition. The child isn't growing, they're conforming. Consider this: the 7-year-old who's praised for being the outgoing one might, by 10, feel ashamed for wanting solitude. The quiet toddler labeled the introvert might, by middle school, hold themselves back from joining teams or speaking up. Not because they aren't capable, but because they've already learned the script they're expected to perform. And it isn't just about accuracy. The real danger is self-fulfilling identity. A label isn't neutral. It shapes behavior. It trains the child to filter their own experience through the narrow lens of what they've been told they are. Even the most celebrated labels carry a hidden threat. You're so empathetic becomes, you're not allowed to be angry. You're so logical becomes, you're not allowed to feel overwhelmed. And perhaps most tragically, you're so gifted becomes, you're not allowed to fail. All of it sounds like encouragement. None of it feels like freedom. This is where the parenting challenge deepens, because the very framework we turn to for guidance, the type system, is often too rigid to handle the fluidity of a developing self. Typing tools assume stability, but children are movement. Even researchers who support the theory behind MBTI agree. Personality in children is not a still photograph, it's a time lapse. Traits appear, disappear, transform, and return. That's not inconsistency, that's growth. So if a child is imaginative today and grounded tomorrow, if they seek solitude in the morning and crave connection by night, that's not confusion. That's the healthy, messy process of becoming whole. The problem is most systems, including ours as adults, don't reward ambiguity. We prefer neat stories. We want a parent like scientists, measuring and predicting, but raising a child is more like tending a wild garden. You don't know what will bloom. You just create conditions for growth. This is the paradox typing. Your child can feel like an act of understanding, but when done too early or too rigidly, it becomes an act of limitation. And limitation disguised as insight is the most dangerous kind of misunderstanding. So what do we do when the need for clarity feels overwhelming? We pause. We remind ourselves that discomfort is not the enemy, it's the sign we're facing something real. That mystery, not mastery, is the path to real connection, and that our child is not a problem to be solved, but a person to be revealed, and sometimes the only thing standing between who they are and who they could become is the story we've already told ourselves about them. Every so often a child is born who defies the script, who doesn't match the boxes, the categories, the projections, who frustrates the system and challenges the story. And instead of being shaped, they resist, not with rebellion, but with essence, with truth. James Hillman believed those children weren't problems. He believed they were messages. In his acorn theory, Hillman argued that every child arrives with a particular pattern inside them, like an acorn already encoded with the oak tree it will become. Not a blank slate, not a general potential, but a very specific destiny. The child's job is to grow into it. The adult's job is to not get in the way. But getting in the way is what we do best. Not out of cruelty, out of fear. Parents see a restless, high-energy child and label them difficult, missing the dancer beneath the surface. They see a solitary child and assume something is wrong, overlooking the contemplative soul quietly weaving worlds in silence. They see difference and call it dysfunction, but often it's not disorder, it's just unfamiliar genius. Hillman warned that the acorn often shows itself through obsession, sensitivity, strangeness, the very things most adults are trained to correct. But these quirks are clues, soul markings. And when adults ignore or suppress them, the child doesn't vanish, they fracture. Carl Jung, too, knew that every child holds something sacred. He spoke of the miracle of the living soul and warned us not to reduce it to theory. Learn your theories, he said, but put them aside when you touch the miracle. Personality frameworks for him were not cages, they were mirrors, meant to reflect, not define. Marie-Louise von Franz, Jung's closest collaborator, understood this too. She described growth as a spiral, not a straight line. That the path to wholeness doesn't come from conformity. It comes from tension, contradiction, and freedom. A child who is allowed to explore both shadow and strength becomes more than a type. They become themselves. And Erich Neumann, another Jungian voice, gave us the deepest metaphor of all, the child as symbol of the new. Not just new life, but new possibility. In every child is something the world has never seen before. And if we try to fit that into a known category, we don't just fail the child, we fail the future. This is the spiritual side of parenting, rarely spoken but always felt. To raise a child is to stand in the presence of mystery, to protect a flame we do not fully understand. And the greatest violence we can do, even with love in our hearts, is to blow that flame out because it doesn't match the fire we expected. Every label, every type, every diagnosis must begin with humility. The recognition that the child in front of you is more than their observable traits. They are soul in motion. They are purpose incarnate, and your job is not to craft them, it's to witness them. There's a story about an eagle raised among chickens. You've heard it perhaps. A farmer finds an eagle's egg, places it in a coop, and the eaglet hatches beneath a hen. It grows up pecking the dirt, flapping low, watching the others. Never once does it fly, because no one ever told it that it could. And one day, someone does. A visitor to the farm sees the eagle, stunned. "That's not a chicken," he says. "That's an eagle. It was born to fly." The farmer laughs. "Maybe, but it's lived like a chicken all its life. That's what it knows." So they take the eagle to the top of the farmhouse. They lift it into the air. "You're not a chicken," the visitor says. "You were born for the sky." But the eagle looks down at the ground. It knows, and it steps back. It's not that the eagle can't fly, it's that it doesn't believe it should, and it will take being carried to the top of a mountain, facing the wind, the light, and the open sky before that belief finally breaks, and the eagle spreads its wings. It's easy to think of this as just a fable, but every day, real children are raised inside stories that were never theirs. They're called shy, when they're thoughtful. They're called difficult when they're spirited. They're told what they are instead of being asked. And little by little, they fold their wings. Sometimes the damage isn't dramatic, it's subtle. A girl who stops speaking up because her older brother is the smart one. A boy who turns off his imagination because his creativity was called nonsense one too many times. A child who internalizes the idea that their natural way of being is wrong. And what's worse? It often begins with praise. We type our children not just with criticism, but with compliments. You're such a helper. You're the funny one. You're our little scientist. We mean well. But in those words is a boundary, a silent contract. This is who you are. Please stay here. But personality is not a contract. It's a continent. And children need to roam it freely. The fable of the animal school illustrates this perfectly. In the story, all the animals attend the same school where they're taught to run, climb, swim, and fly. The duck is brilliant at swimming but struggles to run, so he's made to stay after school to practice. He loses time in the water. His webbed feet become bruised. Soon he's only average at everything. The squirrel is punished for taking off from trees instead of the ground. The eagle is reprimanded for soaring instead of flapping. And by the end, the only student who thrives is the eel, who can do a little bit of everything, but excels at nothing. This is what happens when we forget that children are not supposed to be the same. Uniformity is not excellence, and difference is not deficiency. Real parenting, soulful parenting, is about noticing the moment your child lights up around music, noticing that they speak more in the car than at the dinner table, noticing that the quiet in them is not a void, but a voice waiting for the right kind of invitation, and then honoring those things, not with performance pressure, not with labels, but with trust. Because when a child is told too many times what they are, they begin to forget what they might become. But when a child is seen for who they truly are, even once, it can be enough to help them soar. The story of Gillian Lynn begins like so many others, with a child in trouble at school. She couldn't sit still. She was distracted, labeled difficult. The adults around her were ready to diagnose her as broken. But one doctor, instead of rushing to prescribe or correct, decided to observe. He turned on the radio and left the room. And in that moment, the child did what her body had been begging to do all along. She danced, and he said something that changed the course of her life. She's not sick, she's a dancer. Gillian would grow up to choreograph Cats, the Phantom of the Opera, and bring beauty to millions. But it could have gone another way. Had she been typed too early, medicated, restrained, her gift might have withered in silence. That's the knife edge we walk as adults in a child's life, between seeing and misseeing, between recognizing essence and rewriting it. Typing a child too soon, too firmly, too confidently isn't insight, it's interruption, because personality isn't a machine to be diagnosed. It's a song still being written, and some verses take years to emerge. That's why the goal isn't to figure your child out, it's to stay open long enough for them to show you. This requires presence, patience, and most of all, humility, because you might love routine and your child might live in chaos. You might crave solitude and your child might need people. You might value logic and your child might be driven by emotion. None of that's wrong. All of it is human. It's not your job to shape their personality. It's your job to create the space where they can find it. That space is made in small moments, letting them linger a little longer in the thing that excites them. Holding your tongue when they react in a way you wouldn't. Offering tools instead of control. And most of all, letting go of the fantasy that they are here to fulfill your script, because they're not here to be your reflection. They're here to be something the world has never seen before. And you get to be the witness. So when you're tempted to define them, pause. When you want to compare them, pause. When you feel the urge to fix what looks like a flaw, pause. And in that pause, you'll find the beginning of something sacred. The real child, the one you haven't fully met yet, the one who is becoming. Don't rush it, because the most powerful thing you can give them is the freedom to grow in all the ways they were meant to. If this moved you, if it brought your own childhood into view, or helped you see a child in your life differently, don't keep that to yourself. Share this with someone who needs it. Subscribe to keep exploring these deeper truths. And in the comments, tell us, what label were you given as a child? And who did you become anyway? Let's rewrite the story together.